New Thought Media Network proudly presents New Thought Men's Community Podcast. Mondays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. With your host, Eamon Duffy. Watch live or anytime on YouTube at New Thought Men's Community. Join Eamon Duffy and his guests as they explore what it is to be a spiritual man today. In partnership with New Thought Media Network. New Thought Men's Community, empowering wholeness, centered in spiritual living.
Hello and welcome to the New Thought Men's Podcast, where we explore what it is to be a healthy spiritual man today. I'm Eamon. It's great to have you with us. Hello and welcome to the New Thought Men's Podcast. I'm Eamon. Today we are speaking with Reverend Dr. David Alexander. David, welcome. So great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Before we get into our conversation, which is around New Thought and the power to change the world, very exciting. Let me just share a little bit about you for those who may not be as familiar with you.
Sure.
So David was raised in New Thought and had a profound spiritual awakening at age 13, after which he dedicated his life to helping others. And in 2004, David co-founded the New Thought Center for Spiritual Living and served as its senior minister for 15 years. Reverend David currently serves as the spiritual director of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. And you can find them at slca.com. So Dr. David is also the author of Freedom from Discord, The Promise of New Thought Liberation. Yes, now available on Amazon. Perfect. And also a visionary organizer for the groundbreaking workbook, Recovery from the Lie of Whiteness, a 12-step approach. You can find more at, nice, there it is. You can find more at reverenddavidalexander.com. And David, wow. You're really living this power to change the world and taking the New Thought principles and philosophy into your daily life, into your, everything that you do. Just from that bio, it's like, wow. Talk about wanting to make a change in the world and showing up and just really being able to live the philosophy of inclusion and oneness and wholeness that we believe in New Thought. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I talk about it in the book. I use the phrase a lot, the radical implication of, right? Mm-hmm. So I think my life is if I may, the radical implication of believing in oneness, mm-hmm. Believing in inclusion, believing that, that there's a power within me that's greater than I am and that I can use it. And so I think if that's kind of the truth that we're starting from, then, you're going to use that in one of two ways. Either there's a power within you greater than you are, and you can use it selfishly to get what you want and to create your little bubble, or there's a power within you greater than you are, and you can use it to not only get your needs met, but to serve the world and humanity, and do both simultaneously and not think that they're separate things, right? Because what it's at the heart of it is that idea of oneness. Everything's connected. And so that's where I try to be. And, we all succeed or fail on a daily basis in that quest. So I do the best I can with the resources that I have. But that's my daily striving, is to make that contribution to the world, and to know that as I do that, my own needs will be met, my family will be taken care of. I'll be able to do all the things that we all want for our individual lives, but also make a contribution to something bigger.
Yeah. And that's where we're at, really. I mean, we look around in society, we look around at the world, we look around at the environment, and it is all calling us to bring out our very best, to bring out the most amazing, to bring out the brilliance, to bring out the genius, to bring out the luminous within us, to shine the light into the world. It reminds me of that wonderful quote from Nelson Mandela that Marianne Williams made so popular. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Yeah. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We must ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Mm-hmm. And that's the truth of it. And that's the one thing that I love about our philosophy, is that it is that call. It is that, it's implicit in, even the vision of creating a world that works for everyone. It really speaks to that. And like, how do we show up for that? Because we know that we're all connected. Like, yeah, when something is done to, in discord to that, we know its implications are going to come back to harm someone or, harm the world. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing a lot of that in our faces right now, politically, socially, environmentally, on so many levels, that it is really a call for us as men, as women, as human beings, to really step into that larger consciousness and context of who are we? Who am I? What am I here for? Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, you just shared, had a beautiful sharing for our summit. Thank you so much. And in that, I loved what you said, started out with, like, initially this rugged individualism. And I had never thought of it this way before, but it was fascinating. And of course, we as men subscribe to that, especially in men's work. We call that the lone wolf syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I love how you took it into the what are the myths around it, and what is the colonizing mindset, and that was really kind of founded in genocide and founded in the taking over of, and the independence, doing it on our own, from way back when. And on some level, it's still affecting us in some ways. Speak a little bit more on that, if you would.
Yeah, it's deep in the psyche of the American ethos, right? And not just of the construct of men, and so the masculine consciousness, but also just of the country itself, that who we are, this manifest destiny. If you've ever seen the giant painting of the westward expansion, and this angel in white floating across the landscape, to the west, and that's what I mean by that colonizing mindset. That so that's why my first work, the recovery from the lie of whiteness, is so important, because it's a construct of supremacy and superiority that just says, well, we just, this land, as the comedian Eddie Izzard says, the Europeans landed here and they go, there's nobody here. Excuse me. I just step over, who are these guys?
Who are these people?
Yeah. And so that's that colonizing mindset that just is that sense of superiority, and the myth of that, which shows up in every cowboy movie and every John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart and all the Wild West westerns, television and movies, idea that that it was just this open plain that you, and it was up to you as that individual, the one man who will come in and save the day. And it's still in our movies, it's still what sells products and blockbusters and politicians and everything. And it's a lie, right? Not it's a lie, and it's like, 49-51% lie, and it's 49-51% a myth. And that myth is that myth of the lie of superiority. And then the lie part is this idea that there is even such a thing as a self-made person.
Yeah.
Right. So we say, oh, but there's that whole Western frontier, and we went west, and that was a huge government subsidy program. Huge, the biggest government subsidy program we've ever done. Right. The I think the next biggest one probably was the creation of the national highway system.
Yeah.
Right? So, so I always like to point that out to when I'm in conversations with people about this. It's like, okay, so the road that you took to your rugged individualism, I won't say the names, but your red hat political rally, you drove on a government subsidized project right, that made that possible, right, for you to get there and to get home, and to pick up some Slim Jims, on the way, and a big goal, and so the westward expansion was a huge government subsidy program that, by the way, was only available to white guys. So the whole thing is built on a house of cards. The superiority is a lie. The individualism, rugged individualism, is a lie. And the self-made person is a lie, because none of us are self-made. We love to tell the story of the self-made person who persevered through trials and tribulations and became successful in business and rose to success or whatever. And it's like, yeah, and somebody taught you to read and write. And somebody taught you to eat, and somebody taught you to walk, and somebody taught you to how to work a computer, and how to gave you your first sales job, or whatever it is that your individualism success is around. Somebody gave you a shot. Somebody gave you an opportunity. Even if you say, well, I failed, and then I tried out on my own and I did it. Okay, but somebody opened a door somewhere for you.
Yeah,
for sure. So it's breaking down those things and telling the truth about them, so that we can claim the deeper truth, which is that we are all connected, that we depend on each other, that even my capacity to forge out my own sort of individualistic lifestyle. If I just say, well, today I'm just going to be, nobody can tell me what to do. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm not going to work for the man. I'm going to go do my own thing. Well, I'm dependent on the pilot showing up to fly that plane so I can go do my own thing, or the bus driver to show up to, you know what I mean? It's like the whole thing is built on a network of mutuality. Yeah. So that we can sort of claim this idea that we stand alone, So we have to break that down, because it's not working. Yeah. It's not working for us, and we need something better than that. And our children are depending on it, and our partners are depending on it, and future generations are depending on it, because the rugged individualism thing has failed us. And I talk about that in New Thought Spaces because it sometimes gets landed at the feet of our philosophy through, the works of Emerson. Sometimes it gets placed, the blame kind of gets laid at his feet, which really has nothing to do with a true reading of Emerson at all. It's just we misinterpret Emerson. We read Emerson in the way that we want to fit our narrative, much like we do the Bible. We cherry pick quotes and ideas. And Emerson, when he was talking about self-reliance, the self was the capital self. It was the spirit within you. Yeah. And it was that one self that connects all of us. Yeah. And to rely on that, to rely on the wisdom that connects you with everything. That's what self-reliance is. It's not me, even though he spoke about that in a very prideful way, he also deeply understood his interconnectedness, his capacity. He was deeply just generous with his words about his friends and the people around him that gave him the lifestyle he knew he had a life of privilege. And his buddy, Henry David Thoreau, and the whole idea of Walden Pond and this idea of living independently, that was because their wives had money. Okay. And before they became successful and people were buying their books, they came from aristocratic society, and they married into wealth.
Wow.
So their ability to live on the back lot on the pond and just, wax and wane about love and nature and all of that. They had servants. They had people that brought them food. I mean, they had, it's just like, and they knew that. They were aware of the privilege that they had.
Yeah.
And so, again, we misread them. So,
it breaks it down for me. It definitely is a shift in mindset. Having owned my own business and, for many, since I was 20, and done it all myself. It's which I know is a lot, because I know how much is needed, in my trade that I used to be in, of construction, of where those materials come from and how many hands touch it. I mean, we even look at our food, how many people touch it, even before it gets to the grocery store, before it comes into our hands. How many people are required to, I just got my truck out of the shop, how many people are required to build and maintain those things that then run on a road system that is, then built by construction people, that is built by so many. And when we start to really look at it, you're right, it just all unravels. It really does. And in a good sense of, like, we should be grateful. We should be more humbled. We shouldn't be so, look what I've done. And of course, all of us who have built our own business know, anybody who's done anything great knows that there is a whole team, any superstar, any of that stuff. There's a whole team behind any CEO. There's a whole team behind all of those people. And the notion that we even can do it ourselves is just preposterous. I remember this one, it was a short little, like maybe 2-minute film a little while ago that was going around in men's work and men's groups a while back. It was all of this, all of the times that they say one man. It's like, this one man has saved the world. This one man, and it's literally one man for like 2 minutes straight, of everything from superheroes to CEOs to one man will save us, and we have that almost mindset of like, oh, the president's going to save us, our elected officials are going to save us, the CEO is going to save our company, the minister is going to save our souls. And it almost is like it lets us off the hook on some level of responsibility to really show up and say, you know what? It isn't up to one person. It's up to so many people that are responsible for this one person. And I think when we look and we see truly good leaders and generous leaders, like level 5 leaders, when we're looking at someone who is truly an incredible leader, we see this because they're just so humble. And Jim Collins in his Good to Great books talk about this so much. I love his stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, how do we show up as leaders and try and take ourselves off of that pedestal on a regular basis and be humbled and give so much accolades and praise to all of the people who've been a part of that. And I think when we miss that part of it, even when we cook dinner, yes, I've cooked dinner, to then sit down and go, yes, I'm grateful for all the hands that have touched this, all of the people who have brought it to my table, all of the living beings that have sacrificed themselves. So beautiful, so beautiful. I love this. We could talk about this for a much longer time, but I do want to kind of move on a little bit. So we talked about history and our history, especially in the United States, but also I wanted to just talk about our history of New Thought. There was a wonderful, and you were in it, the New Thought movie.
Yeah.
That kind of shared a lot about this history. So if you're interested, you can find that. But it really started, in a lot of ways, New Thought with Emma Curtis Hopkins and her, mentor, Mary Baker Eddy, who of course started Christian Science.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as Emma Curtis grew and expanded and come to just find more of an expanded view of everything, and then taught the Kramer sisters, and they created Divine Science, and then the Fillmores and Charles and Meredith. Anyhow, I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind. But the Fillmores, who created the Unity.
Myrtle, Charles Myrtle.
Charles and Myrtle, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Ernest Holmes was on the tail end of that. I think he was kind of the last one, or last big one, that was like, who created the science of mind and spirit philosophy,
right.
Who then was changed kind of recently, historically anyhow, into the Centers for Spiritual Living, at least as an organization.
Right.
But his philosophy and those philosophies all fall under this New Thought umbrella of New Thought. And I didn't know that. I found the science of mind and spirit philosophy through Mile High Church here in Lakewood, Colorado, which is a wonderful, amazing center. And I thought, this is like spiritual Disneyland. I just loved it and had such an amazing time over, 30 years being there with them, and getting to see Dr. Roger, who was the lead minister, who was just incredible, and all the teams. And he was really a level 5 leader, in my view, anyhow.
Yeah.
He shared praise. He was like, no, this is the team. This is, and kept taking himself down off that pedestal in such beautiful and wonderful ways. But I think even this philosophy goes back even 200 years, 100 years more, and probably even longer, into the mysticism of Judaism and Christianity and all, even the Eastern. I love that Ernest Holmes brought in a lot of the Eastern philosophy and Hinduism and Buddhism, and just kind of tried to make it more well-rounded, I think. But I'd love to hear more about this from your perspective, having been in this movement for since you were a child, really.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, I want to mention a resource for everyone, newthoughteducation.com. And there's a free course on there on New Thought 101 with a PDF, and it has a link to that movie you were talking about and all of that. So, and I've got, it's a really great resource. So check that out, newthohteducation.com. And a couple of things that you mentioned. One, you going further back than before Emma Curtis Hopkins and her teacher, Mary Baker Eddy, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby was kind of really where it started in American history. Quimby was studying this phenomena from Anton Mesmer, where we get mesmerism, or now hypnotism. And so eventually psychotherapy and, all of that psychology really emerges out of that. This idea that there's something sort of mechanical happening in the mind. In hypnotism, we know that the conscious mind is put to sleep, the subconscious mind receives a suggestion, and the physical body responds. And Quimby witnessed that through a student of Mesmer who was from France, a student from Mesmer who was here in New England, demonstrating that. And he was fascinated by that. And he said, well, what is the essence of what is happening there? And so he followed that and studied, and then he studied that in relationship to the healings of Jesus and in scripture. And he said, well, there's something interesting there where in all of the healings that Jesus does, he asks for permission from the individual, right? Will thou be made whole? Are you willing, to see? Is that what you want? There's all of this buy-in from the individual. And so he realizes that there's something about this, the receiving of this subconscious suggestion, and that the body responds. And so out of that, he develops his work. Mary Baker Eddy becomes one of his students, and then everything kind of rolls from that. And there's two things I want to point out about that. One, but really what it is the power of the mind over the body, right? That's the origin story of New Thought, the power of the mind over the body. And then ultimately the integration of everything back into the one, and the greater powers of the universe that make that possible, that reveal themselves through all the things that you said, all the ancient wisdom, native and first person spirituality, African spirituality, Hinduism, so on and so forth, the Greek mythologies and Greek philosophy and all of that, which is a lot, right? It's a mouthful. But there's something significant that even in the telling of our story that I want to make sure that we explicitly point out, and I do so in my book, and that is one, while the kind of the stream begins with Quimby and then goes from there, it really becomes significant through the work of women. Yeah. It is the women. It is Mary. It is Emma. It is the Brooks sisters. It is Myrtle Fillmore. It is the push of women. And when they are doing that in the first 50 years of New Thought history, there is an integration between the powers of the mind, well, what we call affirmative prayer and affirmative thinking, and metaphysical interpretation of scripture, which is just sort of, non-literal and receiving the stories as wisdom teachings. Mixed in with all of that is a deep understanding of our social responsibility. Right? The women do not separate that. They understand that all of this means that we have a social responsibility. And so the fuel for the early New Thought movement was the women's suffrage movement and all of the pamphlets that they had that distributed that literature and poems and writings of Ella Wheeler Wilcox and so many others. The names are escaping me right now, but they had this huge literature arm that went all across the nation in these small little subscribing pamphlets that you could get, and embedded in those were New Thought authors that were all women, and those periodicals were also talking about the suffrage movement and women's rights and the liquor laws and all of that. So the two went hand in hand, and it wasn't until the 1930s that it switched into the hands of primarily of men, the leadership of the movements. And then also the country changed into an industrialization, productivity kind of mode of churning out product and profit. And the philosophy also turned at that time into a sort of personal success driven philosophy, and remained that way for a long time. And some would say still today that that's the primary thrust of the teaching. I don't agree with that. I think liberation theology is the thrust of the teaching, which is why I wrote the book. So there's that. And then the next thing I want to point out, because I think it's very important, is the last thing that we forget is the modern history. So we have where it started. We have the women who had their profound impact on it. We have the men who took over in the sort of personal success movement that it became. And then the most recent history, I want to make sure we pause to really get this in. All of the significant growth of New Thought in modern times after Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes is not the last one, because after him is Johnny Coleman in Chicago, Black woman, the Universal Foundation for Better Living, whole movement, right? Michael Beckwith in Los Angeles. Again, African-American. And before both of them, Reverend Ike in New York City, and a huge following that Reverend Ike had. So 3 icons of the modern era of New Thought are all African-American. And we forget that, we stop with the white guy,
Yeah, thanks for correcting that. Yeah.
No, it's because it happens all the time in our conversations.
Yeah.
And so all of the modern history is anchored in African Americans, and as a liberation theology, really. And so my book explains more about that. But so all of it, it's a big tent with lots of fascinating, elements to it. And at the heart of all of it is the power of belief and positivity and affirmative thinking and the power and responsibility that we have to make the world a better place. So there's lots of nuances and fascinating places rabbit holes to discover. But there you go.
Thank you, David. Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for including to paint the larger picture of all of that. Yeah. Absolutely, because this is us. This is our history. This is who we are. And so, even me being a minister, there are some of those things that I didn't realize that were so palpable and just even like I'll think back to Mary Baker Eddy and Emma Curtis Hopkins, two women in the 1800s, basically starting a spiritual organization. It just blows my mind of the will and the drive and the clarity for them stepping forward. So it's great to hear a little bit deeper on the founding and the growth and expansion then of our movement. Yeah. It's so rich and diverse, like our philosophy. Exactly. It is inclusive. It is that, yes, we are whole, we are equal. And I think for us as ministers, it's maybe a little bit easier to see and to say, yes, I see spirit, I see spirit, I see spirit, I see spirit, and to not have this philosophy and to not have this perspective to, lean into and to come from that perspective lens that I've had to grow and see, it would be, I see you as, this or that or the other thing, and you're separate from me and we're separated. And this whole, separateness, because on this external level, there are differences. It's the differences if we look to nature. I love always referencing nature. It's the difference when we look to nature. Like, yes, I mean, even though the same flower is, abundant in a field, it's still planted in different places, and it has maybe a leaf here or an extra flower or an extra petal or something like that. And that's what makes it that uniqueness and that beauty. I love the diversity that we celebrate in our organization and in our communities, because that really is that health. And as we look at something like monocropping, it is the health and diversity of farming to have the diversity. Right. It's really weak as a monocrop, as a single, the corn kernel, the same one over and over and over again.
You deplete the soil, you weaken the crop, and if you just let nature take its course, it will naturally diversify. It will naturally diversify itself, and in order to be strong and grow. Yeah.
Love that. And so we can see this, even on a planetary level, even on a universal or cosmic level. The diversity is all we have to do is look out there in the stars. And yet at the same time, we're 99.9% the same stuff. It's this 1%, this teeniest bit that we focus on and say, oh, you're a different color, you're a different gender, you have different preferences this way or that way. And it's like, how ridiculous is that? On some level, we're so much alike. We have the same brains, we have the same blood, we have the same, genetics, we have the same things, needs and desires and hopes that all of us have of, happiness, all the good stuff, happiness, abundance, love, joy, those fulfillments of life that we all desire.
Absolutely. There's a level at which we are all the same. There's a level at which we are sort of in various affinity groups, we're talking about men or women or other gender expressions, or we're different ethnicities, or part from different, speak different languages and have different culture, or we're sports fans of different teams, or whatever it is. There's all kinds of stratification of affinity, and those are all powerful and unique to honor and to recognize. And yet there's a part of us that is like no other being on the planet, that even though I'm a baseball fan and I'm a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals, so I have that immediate affinity with those other individuals, and I'm a man and I'm a white man and whatever, and I'm a father, so I can bond with other fathers. And yet, even if you put me in the same room with somebody else who has all of those other same things, that person and I are completely unique individuals. So all three of those realities are true of us at the same time. And navigating that is a full-time job. It's called being human.
Yeah, absolutely. I think oftentimes Spirit has a wonderful sense of humor because there is so much paradox in the world.
Yeah.
So I want to keep this conversation going, just because I think there's maybe a few more things I'd love to talk about. In your talk, you talked about this quote from Ken Wilber that was authentic transformation of the soul, or unseats us from our soul, that to shout from our heart.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. What a
yes. It says all those for whom authentic transformation has deeply unseated their souls must wrestle with the profound moral obligation to shout from the heart. So if you have an authentic transformation that sort of, it unseats you, it pulls you out of the mooring of your safety, or of your conditioning, or of your comfort, or whatever that is, or of those affinities and identities that kind of maybe hold you back and keep you locked in to a particular paradigm or box. But authentic transformation about your oneness and the cosmic connection to everything and all of that will unseat you from that, right? And then he says that therefore you must wrestle with the profound moral obligation to shout from the heart, right? To tell the world who you are and what you're about, and to contribute to that creating of a world that works for everyone. It's a beautiful idea. Later in the same book, in the same paragraph or page, he says that it's a terrible, that this kind of realization is a terrible burden, that those who are allowed to see are simultaneously saddled with the obligation to communicate that vision in no uncertain terms. And that's the bargain. That if your soul is wakened up to see, then you're saddled with the obligation to express that vision. That's kind of the role of the prophet. That's but again, going back to that one man, or rugged individualism, it's not that there's only a few, right? What's part of the beauty? It kind of brings us back to the heart of what New Thought is. The beauty of the New Thought teaching is not that we have a prophet in Ernest Holmes, not that we believe that one person in our history, be it Quimby or Emma or Mary or Holmes or anybody else, that they were the ones who saw, but rather that there is a capacity for all of us to see, that we all have the opportunity to see what is really true about ourselves and about the way in which the universe is made, that we're all connected. And if that's true, then it's not the obligation of the prophet or the mystic to go and evangelize and tell the world. It's all of our responsibility.
Yeah.
To shout and to share that in our own authentic way.
Yeah. To start, I mean, for us as New Thoughters, we know that we start within and that we do that inner work. And I think to shout from the heart just spoke to me so much. And I think to men right now, we're done with the shut it down, don't show your emotion, that same BS that we
and shouting from the head and shouting from the anger and from the fear and the insecurity. It's like shout from the heart.
But to say, yes, and to open our hearts and to really explore that and to do that healing work that we can do within ourselves to heal that emotional body, to heal the emotional trauma, to really support ourselves in the growing of our emotional intelligence that was stunted at maybe 2 or 6 or 10, or maybe if you were lucky 15, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating to look at younger men now who are much more open and much more available and much more a whole person versus my generation and older generations who really had to kind of lock that down and look the part and, shove it down and stuff it down instead of being able to be the whole people that we are. It just, when I look at it now, it almost just seems like insanely ridiculous that was a part of it. And I get why there's a whole, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there's a whole litany of why that was.
Yeah.
Military, so much of the things that are around warrior instead of around being able to be.
I talked about it in my talk, right? I was the latchkey generation, Gen X. We came home from school and watched, G.I. Joe and the A-Team.
Yeah.
And that was all about rugged individualism and saving the world.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, David, we could go on with this conversation, and I hope to have you back at some point to have more conversations like this, because this has definitely been eye-opening for me. I want to kind of close it out with a question that I've been asking the other speakers, and that is, what does healthy masculinity look like in the 21st century?
Oh, wow. It's, it's like the $1 million question, and one that we so profoundly have to find an answer to. And I'm going to give an answer because it's what's up in the world right now in the political landscape. And I hope that that's okay to do. And I know this will be aired a little bit later, but, I kind of have a one name or and not that it's about the one person again, but a 2-word answer right now to that. What does healthy masculinity look like? Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket, who is, kind of being introduced to the world right now. And I'm calling him like America's dad. Right. Wow. And for many people, it's the dad, sort of from a psychological figure standpoint, the dad that we never had, right? Or the dad that we wished we had. This gentle yet strong, football coach. I think National Guard served his country in the National Guard, was a football coach, social studies teacher, a congressman, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things, but there's this persona of gentleness and kindness and wholesomeness, the kind of, all the memes, Minnesota nice, that I think is ringing true for people, like, oh yeah, that's what we need, as opposed to kind of the John Wayne, rugged individualism figure. It's this guy who, not only coached the football team and went from 0-27 the season before he came on to in 3 years to state champions, but also formed the first gay straight alliance club at the high school. Like both of those things existing simultaneously. Wow. Right. And so if you remember, I think I asked you before we started the broadcast, the Chuck Norris memes that would happen online, and the kind of the jokes, and Chuck Norris is so tough that they're so strong, fill in the blank, and they're hysterical and they're funny. And, And now kind of the pendulum swing to the other side is happening currently in social media of, hey, Tim Walls is going into the house to get a pop. He wants to know if you want one. Tim Walls is putting $20 in your back pocket because he knows you're going through a rough patch right now. Like it's this like over nice gentleness, that sweet grandpa, uncle, dad, whatever figure. And so it's like, yeah, that's, can we cultivate more of that, please?
Yeah.
And that's not about telling people how to vote or anything like that, but the polarity of that. And what's interesting is that polarity exists on the whole spectrum of the ticket, right? Because you've got the kind of Rambo warrior thing, toxic masculinity still kind of being promoted on one side, and then you got this other thing on the other side. And so that to me is what it looks like. It looks like masculinity that's connected to heart and to compassion and to serving others, and all that thing you mentioned, level 5 leadership, recognizing the team around you, recognizing where you've come from and who has helped shape you, and given you a shot so that you can be who you were meant to be, and making sure that you open the door for somebody else. It's what we desperately need, and therefore I think just from a psychological standpoint, that's going to hit a subconscious need in the psyche, and is going to play out in the election, which I'm here for. I've got to say.
Yeah, I do want to mention the 100 days of prayer that you've started in our movement.
Yes.
Is just so amazing. David, I want to thank you so much for that, because it's just incredible getting a voicemail every day and raising the consciousness around the election, not saying which way to vote, but just having that greater awareness. And that's what we do, right? We hold the high vision. So it's about elevating that thought and knowing that greater good is taking place for all of us. This world that we're working towards, building this world that works for everyone. And I think for me anyhow, that's the true promise of America. That's the true promise of freedom. That is really what I believe that our country has stood for and does stand for and will continue to stand for, is my hope. Yeah, absolutely love it. And even if we look at this and just take all the personalities away from it, right? It's really on a deeper level, what it's asking, like on an archetypal level almost, it's inviting us to say, how do we want to live? How do we as men want to show up? And there's old patriarchal ways. There's old ways around control. There's old ways around money, and money going to the few rather than the many. There are a lot of different, I think, possibilities for that internal. Like, I always like to take it in and own it as much as I can. Like, there is a little tyrant in me. There is a little greediness in me. There is I own all of this stuff that's going. There is the who's benefited from this patriarchal system for sure. All of these things, and when we can take them in and do that inner work, and a lot of times it's called shadow work for us as men, to be able to take these parts of us that we maybe have disassociated from or maybe don't like and shove them down. But to be able to take them in and just bless that and just see this evolution, the spiral upwards, almost this, this spiral dynamics of moving into these higher realms of understanding, or even Maslow's pyramid, right, of needs, of moving from safety and survival into, community, which allows us to then grow beyond that and ultimately allows us spiritual illumination and those kinds of things. So I think it is a call for us as New Thought men, to be able to stand in this truth, to stand in this knowing, to really deeply understand what our responsibility is to do the inner work so that we are freeing up that space for that elder consciousness, the Tim Walls, for the beneficial masculinity to the world, for this healthy, generative, loving, supportive, nurturing that stands for equality, that stands for wholeness, that stands for one that knows we're all in it together on some level. Like, we're all on this planet. We know what's going on. We're in it together, people. And so, that, I think for me, that's what it speaks to, even in the inner world of how do I do my own healing work? How do I be angry less? And how do I be generous more? How do I help more? And be less selfish?
Exactly. That's
Beautiful
it. It's the invitation.
David, I have so enjoyed this conversation. It has been beautiful. I just want to plug a little bit here. You can see more of David on slca.com, as well as reverenddavidalexander.com. His new book out, Freedom from Discord, on Amazon. And just bless you, love you. I'm so grateful that you're doing the good work that you're doing in the world. And we're there with you. We're there with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for this work and this podcast and the Men's Summit and all the great stuff that you're doing. It's an honor to be a part of it.
It's my joy for sure. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. There is much more to come, so stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this interview from the New Thought Men's podcast. For instant access to all podcast interviews, talks from our summit, men's groups, and so much more, join us at newthoughtmens.community. Thanks so much for being with us today. There's more to come, so stay tuned in.